his way as he makes his way down.
You were saying, Francesca, the Vatican Gardens, which he probably walked. I thought it very beautiful that in the Vrogito, the last act, which they placed in his coffin, there was a summary of his life and of who he was and of his pontificate. And in particular, he was described as a simple and popular pastor in his archdiocese in Argentina, who traveled far and wide by metro and by bus, living in a flat, preparing his own food because he felt like a normal person.
And I think he made everyone he met feel like he was a normal person, and that they were meeting a normal person. And the Pope of the peripheries, that's really what he was. And especially talking about his traveling, and he really traveled the world. His penultimate trip, which Linda, you were on, and he really went to the other side, the forgotten side of the world.
Absolutely. I must say I've had the privilege to be on two faraway trips. One was the one you're just mentioning that took us to Indonesia, Timor-Leste, Papua New Guinea, and Singapore, but even the year before to Mongolia to visit the smallest Catholic flock in the world, 1,500 Catholics of the entire Mongolian population. So yes, he traveled into the peripheries of the city, going to visit prisoners, going to visit elderly people, poor people, always welcoming refugees, but he'd also travel across the world to the remotest and furthest away places from the Vatican, obviously, that is. And people always came out in floods to welcome him. I'll never forget landing in Timor-Leste, which is a tiny and new country, and the entire the half of the entire population, 750,000 people, came to the mass. The floods of people just there to welcome him. Very moving.
And they're countries that are so far off the grid, we barely even hear of them. And another gesture that was one of his final gestures was he visited the prison. He went to Regina Coeli, I believe, which is a prison in the Trastevere area of Rome, not too far from the Vatican. And it's a symbolic gesture that he does every year at Easter, and of course with him having been unwell, we weren't sure whether he would have done, and the fact that he did meant so much to prisoners worldwide, but all marginalized people. And I think the Pope himself said, you know, it could have been me, it could have been anyone in your position. And that awareness that he had and that he transmitted to the people who were suffering the most, I think is one of the greatest legacies that he could be leaving behind.
And it's really fitting that the people who will welcome him and say their goodbye at St. Mary Major are, as you've mentioned, the people who've suffered, the homeless, migrants, people who are marginalized. So people who've met him before as well. We've been told around 40 of them will be there. There might be more or less, but some of them have actually met Pope Francis. Sometimes before going on an apostolic journey, or during religious feasts, he would have them over at Santa Marta and meet with them, just to...
He's crossing the bridge. He's crossing the Tiber.
We see, yes.
Yeah. This is the beginning of the Via Corso Vittorio Emanuele. He's passing here in front of some very symbolic places.
Indeed, and he's just, as you mentioned, crossed over the river. We saw that beautiful drone photography and that live video that we'll have more of here. And
yes, it's remarkable also. It's the first papal funeral, can we say, with this advanced technology, digital technology that is really giving everyone the possibility to almost be there.
Indeed, for our television viewers, they're seeing some context in a way that's revolutionary, I would say. We have, of course, a vehicle preceding the entourage, or being the entourage, or
the hearse, the procession.
The procession, and you can see all the crowds of people on either side of the street as they wave there. And again, it's particularly poignant and touching that, again, he'll be welcomed by the people he's always reminded us not to forget, the ones who need our help, the homeless, migrants, and refugees. And
I must say, in these days in which tributes have been pouring in, again and again I've been hearing he was a voice for those who had no voice. So hopefully that voice will continue to resonate.
Well, right until the very end, his final appearance on Easter Sunday, he dedicated his words, his Urbi et Orbi blessing, which someone else read for him, but he dedicated it to the people suffering war, and he has always been a voice for the people in countries where everything is being destroyed by arms. Pope Francis has been #1 advocate for disarmament. He's been the #1 advocate for solutions to be reached, for diplomatic talks to take place. He has reiterated every time he made an appeal that war is a defeat. It's become a slogan.
You have read so often for him at the general audience, which is always an occasion for him to reiterate this appeal. And Francesca, you wrote that lovely farewell that we published on the web about the Pope of Peace, which particularly, I think, resonated with you.
I have to say that one of the things I learnt reading at Pope Francis's audience is that his style of being closer to the people resonated in every aspect of his pontificate. So it was very clear when he said the words, and then in other smaller actions it was clear to the people involved. And this is the case for the general audiences, because you may remember up until a few years ago the readers at the general audiences were all Monsignori, religious consecrated men who work within the Vatican walls. And Pope Francis changed that, and the readers became people like me. I'm a woman, I'm not a religious, not a consecrated woman, and all of a sudden that audience and that stage, which before saw only men, only consecrated men, saw people from all over the world, all different ages, all kinds of different accents, and it really represents the people in the square to whom you are transmitting the Pope's message. And I can only imagine that being one of the faithful in St. Peter's Square, which I have been on numerous occasions, even for audiences when other people are reading, it really builds that bridge. And that's just a very small gesture that people may not perhaps have even noticed, but to be involved and to be asked to participate in something like that, I mean, it's been a real honor reading for him at audiences.
And you're right, it may be a small gesture, but it is symbolic of opening a window that he's been doing more and more in his pontificate to include people in the church. You know, he's been trying to open to women. He's been so strong in reaching out to other religions, to other ecumenical denominations. I'd say perhaps this way of inclusion culminated in his call for the Synod on synodality, which is a process that is destined and that he has wanted to continue, which is asking the Church to include everyone, to listen to everyone.
And Linda, we just passed through Largo Argentina, which is literally right in the center of the Eternal City of Rome, of historic Rome. as he continues on, heading close now, coming up on Piazza Venezia. And all the crowds, incredible, lining both sides of the street. Again, they preferred that people not follow behind the vehicles for safety reasons, above all, apart from security. But
They're also going pretty fast.
yeah, they're moving a little faster, but people are getting a good view of all. And just wanted to mention, you were mentioning the Pope appeals for peace. That drew a lot of applause during the Mass, the Requiem Mass, when Cardinal Ray spoke about that, saying how much the Pope has appealed for peace, worked for peace, appealed to the consciences of all people to do their utmost to bring peace in our world, and that brought rounds of applause from the crowds in the square.
And I think it was also mentioned in the Ruggito that you mentioned earlier, Linda, the document that that was written and sealed within the Pope's coffin. It was mentioned some of the countries that he has dedicated so much attention and care to, and I can't remember them all, but I know that one of them was Ukraine, another one was Palestine, Myanmar was mentioned, and it's true, these are all countries that when you think of Pope Francis and peace, you associate these countries to that. And
no, I'm saying we were talking about losing a voice for the forgotten. He was the only world leader who would never forget to mention ongoing conflicts that are completely out of the mainstream media. Myanmar, as you just mentioned, Sudan, the difficulties in South Sudan,
Haiti,
yes.
And countless, the list is really, unfortunately there are so many that we don't talk about as much as we should.
Here we are in Piazza Venezia. This is the altar to the fallen soldier.
And there are people all going all the way up the steps.
Big crowds there, big crowds. The larger area open there.
And now we're going to start going down what is personally one of my favorite places in Rome. It's the road that runs through the Roman Forum with Imperial Rome on both sides.
There we've seen a lot of construction. They're extending the subway line, hence all the construction equipment there.
But can I say Rome is becoming more and more beautiful as works are ongoing to bring out its best, and there's so much that's layers and layers of history.
I always think of how much Pope Francis loved being among the crowds, and in a special way he's here with everyone turning out, and his spirit is present here in a way in greeting and blessing the crowds, I'm sure.
It's so lovely also that he wants to be, that he obviously feels Roman. He's Argentine, but he's Roman. He's the Bishop of Rome. He's said it so many times. And his devotion to the Salus Populi Romani is so significant as well.
Even his parish visits that he would make on occasion, he would go to the most remote parishes, the ones really on the outskirts of the city. The idea of being